Welcome to Global Health 620. This week we're reviewing Test 2, progress on midterm assignments, and textbook concepts from chapters 11 through 16 that'll prepare you for discussion boards and finals. Before we look at those selected concepts, let's review some of the important changes that I recently made to the syllabus and due dates. Based on your midterm performance, I've decided to eliminate 17 to 21, chapters 17 to 21 from the required reading. And also I'm pushing back some due dates so you can focus in more on improving your final papers and maps and developing your 10-minute video that's due at final. After chapter 16, there will be no more textbook reading assignments for this class. So no more reading to worry about at all. I pushed back due dates for test 2 and discussion board 2 so you have more time to prepare. Test 4 and the final reflection assignment will address your knowledge of reportable disease that you've been investigating in your particular state and non-US area of interest. Your final assignment will be to score your final discussion assignment will be to score and comment on somebody else's presentation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Everyone did fine on test 2 except for this one question, so I did want to point out the page number where you can find the answer in chapter 5. I'm guessing some folks use ChatGPT because everybody got the answer wrong, and it looked like they got it wrong in a similar way. But like I said, you can look to page 156 and see where this answer came from. So looking back at the midterm assignments that you did submit, I reviewed each component, mainly looking to see that you had estimates in your tables, that you had maps that reflected resources and needs, as Dr. Topmiller recommended, and that your paper included appropriate references to the literature and clear description of etiology, epidemiology, and mapping, and that your disease profile included the basic elements that were required for the rubric at midterm. At the midterm, a few of you showed pretty great progress and had good maps, and some of you made much less progress. The main overall problem, I think, was failure to reference related textbook chapters and draw those into your description. 2 or 3 of you, you see here in yellow, at midterm still appear to be trying to study multiple state reportable diseases that aren't very related, and also study those across multiple countries. I think I told each of you in personal comments that you should really just pick one primary disease, reportable disease, and then report that across counties in your state and counties or sub-jurisdictions or divisions or districts in one non-US country. Will enable you to make more in-depth comparisons of demographics, environmental risk factors, and detail public health agencies as necessary within just 2 targeted areas. Again, if you focus on and want to better explain how 2 diseases have related etiology and epidemiology, you can do that, but I don't think that there's that much time left to get into those kinds of deep descriptions for multiple diseases across multiple countries. Just make sure everyone cites and explains reporting standards, across countries or across counties in the U.S. and across states and subregions in other countries, and consider adding more country and state level characterization in each area, addressing subpopulation demography, features of the health systems that be considered bright spots or problem areas that are in high need of intervention. There's only one person that didn't submit their midterm, and that person has some catching up to do. Getting into your final textbook chapters, make sure you consider these concepts and discussion questions that I'm going to go over pretty quickly here. This chapter gets into defining the environment in terms of different external microbiological, chemical, and physical exposures and processes. There's some useful tables and graphs you can take a look at when thinking through categories of environment, including household, workplace, community, regional, and global. Table 11 includes examples of sources of unhealthy environmental exposures. Types included in this table are microbiological, chemical, physical, and ergonomic. For your state reportable disease, you should think about not only those basic physical factors, but also particular workforces that may be disproportionately affected by your diseases, TB, multi-drug resistant staph, malaria, HIV, measles. In this table, we see particular countries and including the United States, Sweden, Turkey, and the Philippines. We see Sweden has relatively low occupational injury mortality rates across these high-risk occupations, mining and manufacturing in particular. Service sectors that aren't traditionally considered high risk for mortality, such as nurses and other frontline healthcare and public safety workers, these are became of more interest in recent years, and reportable disease outbreaks and injuries amongst healthcare workers is a fairly neglected and kind of re-emerging topic, particularly when healthcare and public health systems begin to fail. And got into that with as you go through this chapter, you run across major issues, environmental health. And at the end of this chapter, I'd focus in on what should the scope of the term environment be within your final paper and thinking about state reportable disease. How do conceptualization and methodological approaches change when we shift in thinking about environmental hazards to more of human habitats? So try to explain within your state reportable profile across the U.S. and non-U.S. states, counties, townships, subregions, a bit more about the environments in which disease transmission and control is occurring. This is the overall textbook, and particularly this chapter's explanations and examples are pretty outdated. In week 5, I included articles that explain ways impacts of civil conflict on public health systems and population outcomes are being estimated in the Gaza Strip. Week 5 videos explain how UN, USAID have been defunded and eliminated in recent years. As you read into chapter 12, you're introduced to complex humanitarian emergencies, political emergencies, how they're related. Get into particular situations, high-risk situations, where conflicts can increase movement, crowding, and transmission of infectious disease. This chapter gets into indirect public health impacts of civil conflict, and the assigned articles got even deeper into food scarcity, population displacement, and destruction of public utilities, including healthcare systems and other things that are happening currently in the Middle East. You can see here that it's relatively old classification from published December 2016 that Palestinians were the one of the, if not the largest population of refugees out of the 10 major refugee populations. This table gets into some of the mortality rates in conflicts, and again, that's one of the reasons I thought with that issue and Greater Israel being such an important issue, we could read some updated articles and reflect back on this table and chapter in terms of understanding what mortality rates could be classified as, and are classified as genocide. Contributing factors. This chapter gets into effects of armed conflict on health services, as well as the articles. This chapter discusses where human resources, even if they're not directly targeted, healthcare workers might flee in search of safety and security in some situations and leave the population less able to control disease. This chapter gets into specific health outcomes, such as measles epidemics that are facilitated by war and other complex emergencies, nutritional deficiencies that are really described in detail in the assigned article, and other issues, specific health outcomes you can read about in this chapter that come with civil conflict. This chapter touches on health information systems and some of the challenges in measuring crude mortality. It remains an important feature of surveillance throughout the emergency phase of refugee crises and beyond. And again, the video and descriptive papers that I assigned kind of go even further into this problem. So I've encouraged you to read into the articles and this chapter in particular and think about refugee populations and nutritional issues that may inform your own transnational case study, thinking about refugee and migrant populations and crises and non-crisis situations where nutritional deficits or nutritional supplements and micronutrient interventions might improve outcomes. When you get to the end of this chapter, I would suggest looking at discussion questions such as these and thinking about what are the major objectives of any refugee responding unit. What are the major objectives in a refugee emergency that might occur in your areas of interest? Also, think about whether you could explain any U.S. AID or UN relief agencies or NGOs that may serve refugees or migrants, in your areas of interest. If that's not the case, there aren't identifiable refugee and migrant populations, that's fine, but address those if possible in your case study. Chapter 13 gets into the design of health systems. You should be characterizing in your final papers, compare the governance and actors across the states that you're investigating and describing. This chapter gets into basic roles of the state, basic governance and regulation functions, and has some helpful maps that kind of illustrate how systems might work. Should be able to address key payment methods and their consequences, capitation and other sorts of financing and payment methods. This is an example of comparison of the US and the Canadian health system that's included in this chapter. You should be comparing and contrasting the health systems in your final paper to some extent. And discussing issues such as what should be the respective roles of the government and private sector in the health systems that you're studying. Compare and explain for your state reportable disease and specific areas of interest. And try to illustrate in maps as well as your final paper these respective roles of specific agencies. Chapter 14 gets into public health infrastructure, essential public health functions. These are things that you should be characterizing, including laboratory services and reference laboratories, the places that reportable disease samples may go to. And think about ways to strengthen the public health systems in each area that you're writing about. Some discussion questions are how valid are the concerns that public health has received inadequate attention and resources relative to healthcare in your areas of interest, and think about what recommended investments there might be in public health infrastructure. Chapter 15 has some useful figures and descriptions. Here's a conceptual model for needs-based resource allocation that explains the functions of the district population and flows down to the health needs and services at the Ministry of Health and Finance level. This chapter you may discuss, pull out discussion and include in your paper the ways in which local level health staff are managed, what steps could be taken to improve the way in which these staff are managed. This is the last chapter for required reading. There's a lot here in the pharmaceuticals chapter. And you may consider reading through some of these flowcharts and pages of this chapter 16 in order to understand the way that medicines are developed and distributed across the public and private sector. Specifically address the affordability of medicines within your particular treatment regimen for your reportable disease of interest and compare affordability areas that you're investigating. Try and discuss and describe 3 approaches to improving affordability of medications and some of the challenges in implementing them. Again, these are the types of things that you may be able to incorporate and help guide your paper and some facts and concepts out of these chapters will also appear on. Just as a recap of changes that I've made to the syllabus, again, I've eliminated the rest of the reading, so some of these chapters might be interesting for you depending on your disease topic and countries that you're studying, but you don't have to read these and you won't be tested on any content from chapters 17 to 21. Again, I've moved the test 3 due date and also the discussion board due date, and what's left is your final project and test 4. So I've just moved those to both be due on the 10th of October. And I'll be putting in a final reflection assignment. As I said, that'll be basically reflecting on someone else's video that gets submitted at final. Read carefully the rubric for final requirements, and for those of you attending the residency weekend, you'll have some extra opportunities to present and discuss your maps with health landscape. So Dr. Topmiller should be there on Friday when this group gets together. But yeah, I have asked that you all prepare a video upload for the next discussion board, just to make sure that your video skills are functioning, because you're going to have to create a 10-minute video presentation for the final, and that's going to be an important part of that grade. Make sure you reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns about how your paper is coming along. If you want to talk about it next week, just or the following week, schedule